Drake's Super Bowl?
First, I want to say, because while I can't say I watched the entire press conference, I watched more than that clip, Drake's answer was perfect.
Yeah.
This is now the second, actually, AFC East quarterback who I feel has dealt with his shortcomings in a loss in the playoffs better than his biggest media defenders have. Drake Maye made it very clear he was not blaming the shoulder. He didn't run. He didn't, lie. He acknowledged he got banged up in the Broncos game in particular. He'd been banged up throughout the year a bit from the sacks, but he did not blame it on that. So I want to give that young man a ton of credit. I thought he handled that entire thing really well. As far as what we take from his Super Bowl and his playoff run in projecting him forward, I think it would be a massive mistake for Pats fans and for the Patriots organization to simply be like, yeah, not quite as bad, but similar to what happened to the Broncos. Our quarterback got hurt. Like, what do you want from us? As opposed to acknowledging that the struggles were coming pre-Super Bowl. And Dust, if we show my second graphic, he actually, from a passing perspective, played better in the Super Bowl than in the 3 playoff games leading up to the Super Bowl. So
and most of that was late.
It was late.
Gatorade was
Gatorade was stern. It's a great point, bro.
It was
stern
to it.
But the reason I'm saying the team needs to acknowledge that maybe the shoulder did impact his game, but is not the reason for it. How do we try to make sure it doesn't impact the next time he's in the playoffs? Because, he has now had, in his very short career, 33 total games, more 5-sack games than Peyton Manning in his career.
Wow.
7 versus 4 for Peyton.
Wow.
Then Patrick Mahomes in his career, 7 versus 5. Then Dan Marino in his career, 7 versus 2.
That's wild.
Tom Brady, who played more football than anyone ever and only missed time with injury once, the ACL, only had 10 5-sack games in his entire career, playoffs and regular season.
And none of those guys were mobile.
Right. And so Drake has, and Mahomes mobile, obviously, to a degree. But so 102 total sacks, those Mike Vick, Randall Cunningham running stats that we showed, which from last year, which speaks to extra punishment, and just getting beat the hell up, particularly in the playoffs, but a track record of it in his career. All of that to me is, guys, we have to not only do a better job protecting him, he has to do a better job protecting himself. Because the reason I find the Peyton and Dan Marino stats important, Brew, is those guys didn't go their entire careers with elite offensive lines. They just understood, throw it away, get rid of it.
Were sacks like that watched in Dan Marino?
Sacks 1981 to now, and Marino came in the league in 83.
Okay.
So yes, it is. I couldn't go to quarterbacks older than Marino, but you can start with the Marino draft, and you have their whole career sacks game by game, and so
maybe he should have hung in the pocket a little bit.
Well, sure, maybe he would have won a Super Bowl. I don't know, but that to me is what's noteworthy about this, more so than he was a little banged up.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, they've got to, this offseason, improve the offensive line. And maybe Will Campbell, I mean, the knee, he played on a bad knee, so maybe he'll be healthy and that'll improve it. But he's got to get rid of the ball quicker. It's just as simple as that. That was kind of a strength of his, and holding on to the ball, extending plays. That article we referenced yesterday, was it Jeremy Fowler maybe?
Yeah.
But he talked about that being one of his strengths. He could extend plays. However, it also can lead to bad sacks. So he's just got to work that out as a young player, and I think he will and can. But as far as changing my view of him in the Super Bowl, no, not at all. I'm with Nick in this. Number one, it's just sore. Number one, like if it was announced I'm getting surgery tomorrow or something like that, then it would change it. And I'm not trying to belittle the injury, but it's a sore shoulder, all right? And very sore because he had to get a shot for it. but it's not enough for me to look at and say, oh, that's why he struggled. Secondly, as Nick said, he was struggling before the injury. The injury was in the Denver game, second half of the Denver game. He struggled, you know, he wasn't great against the Chargers, obviously. Had some big plays, but also some bad plays against Houston, and then was not very good in the first half against Denver before the injury. And then even in the Super Bowl, you showed it, and we're not going to glorify it, but he threw for 295 yards. He threw a picture-perfect pass to Mac Hollins for the touchdown in the fourth quarter. So he still could throw. His inaccuracy was not because of the shoulder, as you showed with your graphic. It was throughout the playoffs. And so, no, I'm not going to make this give him a pass because of this. But I just think he has to learn from it, and he will, and move on.
It is genuinely amusing, almost absurd, the manner in which we, as a collective football viewing public, dissect and analyze the performance of young quarterbacks, particularly as they navigate the crucible of high-pressure games. The discourse that unfolds is, frankly, quite entertaining in its predictability and its tendency toward extreme overreaction. Take, for instance, the way Nick began sounding every possible alarm regarding the sacks taken by a certain young quarterback, attempting to draw parallels and comparisons to iconic figures like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Patrick Mahomes. It was a frenzied take that left me thinking, my goodness, can we all just take a collective breath for a moment? We are discussing an incredibly young, developing quarterback who just completed his first full season operating within a legitimate, competent coaching structure, something that is not a given in this league. And his performance was, by any objective measure, nothing short of unbelievable. He was a legitimate MVP candidate. In fact, a strong argument could be made that he should have won the MVP award over Matthew Stafford, and he ultimately propelled his team to a Super Bowl appearance. Given that context, can we please, for just a second, apply some perspective and simply chill out? The primary talking point that has emerged, the singular issue that everyone wants to laser focus on, is the sacks. The sacks. The sacks. The sacks. The implication seems to be that Drake Maye is fundamentally incapable of improving in this area, that this is some permanent, unchangeable flaw in his game. The logic suggests that now that the organization and the coaching staff have definitive proof they have something special in him, they won't prioritize working on this specific aspect of his game throughout the offseason and into next year, right? It's apparently inconceivable to some that a young player might actually develop and cut down on a negative aspect of his performance. Of course he will. That's the natural trajectory of player development. And when you actually dig into the data, the situation becomes even more interesting and far less alarming than the surface-level panic suggests. Let's dive into one of my personal favorite advanced metrics because it provides crucial context that the raw sack numbers completely miss. I'm talking about the pressure-to-sack percentage. This statistic measures the rate at which a quarterback takes a sack when they are under pressure. It is a nuanced stat, and it's important to acknowledge that it does fluctuate, sometimes significantly, from season to season. For example, Lamar Jackson's pressure-to-sack percentage is often incredibly low. I recall last year, his was in the single digits, and the same can be said for Josh Allen in certain seasons. The fluctuation is inherent to the position and the situation, especially for quarterbacks who are highly mobile. These players are constantly trying to extend plays, to create something out of nothing, and in doing so, they sometimes get their hand caught in the proverbial cookie jar. We've seen it happen to Lamar, to Josh, to Mahomes, and to countless others. Listen out. They push the boundaries of the play, and occasionally it results in a negative outcome. The metric is perhaps a bit more straightforward when applied to a traditional pocket passer. With that style of quarterback, you can more easily assess, are they getting rid of the ball on time? Are they holding onto it too long? Are they missing reads downfield? Whatever the specific issue may be, the diagnostic process is often clearer. However, there is one consistent, undeniable trend that we observe year after year after year after year in this league. It is almost an iron law of quarterback development. Young quarterbacks, particularly rookies and second-year players, consistently post high pressure-to-sack percentages. This is not an exception. It is the rule. We saw it with Caleb Williams last year. We saw it with Jaden Daniels last year. We'll see it this upcoming year with guys like Sheeter Sanders, Cam Ward, and Jackson Dart. It happens season after season new quarterbacks are always at the top of the NFL in this particular statistical category. They are learning to process speed, to feel pressure, and to make decisions at a pace they've never experienced before. This context is what made Bo Nix's rookie season so wildly impressive. His pressure-to-sack percentage was incredibly low right out of the gate. He was a major statistical outlier, and that speaks volumes about his readiness and his mental processing. Now, it's also crucial to understand that this stat is not solely the responsibility of the quarterback. A significant portion of it falls on the shoulders of the offensive coaching staff, whose job it is to provide the quarterback with solutions when pressure is bearing down. This involves scheming answers, designing hot routes, and ensuring the quarterback has outlets. There was a discussion recently where Greg brought up Josh McDaniels and the solutions he might or might not provide for Drake Maye. And while I may have disagreed with some of the specific choices being discussed, the fundamental point was valid. The coaching staff has a direct impact on this number. So, I absolutely view this as a coaching metric as well, especially once a quarterback has demonstrated that he can functionally handle pressure and isn't just completely sped up and overwhelmed by it. In this specific situation with Drake Maye, I believe a significant portion of the improvement will come from his own development. It's about him internalizing the clock in his head, understanding and recognizing, okay, it's time to get rid of the football. It's about recognizing, okay, it's time to escape the pocket and just tuck it and run. I know he, like most young gunslingers, always wants to throw. He's always looking downfield, trying to make this spectacular play. But part of maturation is understanding that sometimes you can pick up a clean 8 or 10 yards with your legs. You take those yards, you slide, you protect yourself, you flip the ball to the official, and you live to fight another down. That mindset shift, that discipline, will come with time and experience. That's fundamentally why I'm not fully concerned by the raw sack number. You can look at the total sacks and see he was top 4 in the league, and that's a jarring statistic. It's interesting to note that Justin Herbert was obviously up there on that list as well, and yet we seem to collectively gloss over the names of guys like Geno Smith or others because, for whatever reason, their inclusion doesn't fit the narrative we want to build. When you dig into the contextual numbers, the picture becomes even more nuanced. Justin Herbert was pressured 263 times and took 54 sacks. Drake Maye faced 228 pressures and took 47 sacks. That's a very similar ratio. However, the average time to throw for these two quarterbacks tells a different story. Maye's time to throw was significantly longer. We're talking 3.12 seconds compared to 2.93 seconds. That extra time is an eternity in the NFL. It directly indicates a tendency to hold on to the ball, to let routes develop deeper downfield. This is where the analytical bias in sports media becomes so transparent, and frankly, a little funny. It reveals exactly when someone wants to give a quarterback the benefit of the doubt, and when they don't. I recently disagreed with and openly laughed at some logic Nick put forth regarding Caleb Williams. He tried to argue that while Williams might miss some routine throws, the magnitude and impact of his big-time throws were so significant that it was analogous to an NBA player being more valuable as a 40% three-point shooter than a 50% two-point shooter. I found that logic flawed and said so at the time. Yet, here we are with Drake Maye, and the same kind of argument could be made. One could argue that taking those sacks, holding the ball a beat too long, is actually an acceptable trade-off, because he is still generating an extraordinarily high number of big-time throws. It all balances out, according to that line of thinking, when you look at his overall production. A passer rating of 113, 31 touchdowns, a PFF grade of 90.1, a completion percentage hovering around 72%, over 4,300 yards passing, and an average depth of target that was among the highest in the NFL at 9.5 yards. You could make that argument. I'm not necessarily making it here and now. What I am doing is pointing out the inconsistency. Why is that specific argument not up for discussion in the same way? Why is that nuance not extended universally? It's a fascinating double standard. My personal projection is that his sack numbers will absolutely go down. The raw sack total is heavily dependent on the offensive line, which can and should improve. But the metric I'll be watching most closely is his pressure-to-sack percentage. I want to see that number decline, indicating personal growth in processing and decision-making. Currently, his pressure-to-sack percentage sits at 20.6%. To put that in perspective, Justin Herbert is at 20.5%, Josh Allen at 19.7%, Jared Goff at 17%, Jalen Hurts at 16.6%, and Patrick Mahomes at 16.6%. So there is clearly room for improvement, but it's hardly an astronomical, out-of-range number that signals a fatal flaw. The trajectory we saw with Caleb Williams is instructive here. If we look back to 2024, Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams were at the top of the league in this metric. Caleb was at a staggering 28.2% as a rookie. Fast forward, and he made a monumental leap, dropping all the way down to approximately 10%. That is the kind of development that can and does happen. Baker Mayfield was at 25.2%, Jaden Daniels improved to 22.2%, and Drake Maye, in his own sample, was at 21.5%. When you look at the lowest percentages in the league, it's consistently the usual suspects. Josh Allen at 8%, Lamar Jackson at 11.3%. Bo Nix, as a rookie, was already top 4, which again is a wild outlier and a testament to his unique preparedness. This number will always fluctuate. We saw Josh Allen drop to 8% one year and then bounce back up to the 19-20% range in another. It's not a static measure of ability. It's a dynamic measure of situation, scheme, and intent. Based on my observation of this metric over time, living in the teens seems to be the sweet spot for elite performance. If you're in the teens, you're doing your job at a high level. Occasionally, if you're a hypermobile, physically dominant player like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, you might dip into the single digits. But I'm not convinced that's a reliably sustainable place to live year after year. The teens are the consistent hallmark of a quarterback who is executing the offense. Once you start pushing past 20%, you're entering a danger zone where you need to be finding other ways to compensate for those negative plays. But even the elite guys have seasons where they push that boundary. When Patrick Mahomes won his MVP, he was at 10.8%, playing behind the best offensive line in football. Josh Allen has been at 14.7%, at 10.6%, at 19.7%. The variance is real. There are different pathways to a healthy pressure-to-sack percentage. Kirk Cousins, a statuesque pocket passer, consistently posts good numbers not by scrambling, but by getting the ball out on time, with an average time to throw between 2.5 and 2.8 seconds. Jordan Love is able to maintain a solid percentage because he mixes in scrambles effectively. So, the path to success isn't singular. The fluctuation we see in guys like Allen and Mahomes often correlates with what the team needs from them in a given year. Are they being asked to scramble and rip off runs to move the chains? Or are they in an offense that requires them to push the ball downfield, forcing them to hold the ball longer, to let deeper routes develop? This year, I saw Josh Allen holding the ball longer, less willing to just take off on a 5-yard run and slide, because he knew the offense needed a 25 or 30-yard explosive play. He was scrambling to buy time for the big throw, not just to pick up a cheap first down with his legs. The team required something different from him, and that changes the statistical profile. That's precisely what I'll be on the lookout for next year with Drake Maye. Even if the raw sack total stays exactly the same, if he's still taking 4 or 5 sacks in a game, if his pressure-to-sack percentage goes down, that signals genuine development. It means he's getting the ball out quicker or making better decisions under duress, even if the line is allowing the same number of pressures. Conversely, if he hovers around that 20% mark but his sack total plummets, that doesn't necessarily mean he got better. It likely means the offensive line simply got better at reducing pressures. He hasn't demonstrably improved at sack avoidance. The environment around him improved. That's why this specific stat is so fascinating to me. When evaluating sacks, you cannot just look at the raw number. You have to triangulate it with the amount of pressures, the time to throw, and the pressure-to-sack percentage. They tell the complete story together. One final point on this statistical deep dive. Nick made a comment during the Super Bowl broadcast, asserting that, to the millisecond, the average time to throw was identical between Sam Darnold and Drake Maye. First off, I'd have to verify that because I don't recall PFF having that exact same figure, but let's assume it's in the ballpark. Here's the fundamental issue with the time to throw metric as it currently stands. It's skewed for scrambling quarterbacks. I've said this before, and I'll say it again as my concluding thought on this statistical analysis. We need a more advanced, nuanced metric for time to throw. The current calculation factors in every snap, including those where the quarterback scrambles for 5 or 6 seconds before either throwing the ball away, taking a sack, or scrambling for a gain. If a quarterback is running around for 5 seconds, he might be completely lost, have no idea what he's doing, and just be athletic enough to avoid the rush. That extended time artificially inflates the average time to throw, making it look like his offensive line is providing him with a pristine pocket for 4 seconds on every dropback, when in reality, he's just creating that time with his legs through improvisation, not structure. The metric made a lot more sense in a previous era when almost every quarterback took a 5-step drop and delivered the ball on rhythm. In that context, a low time to throw accurately reflected quick processing and a functional scheme. A high time to throw accurately reflected a quarterback holding the ball. But in today's game, with the proliferation of mobile quarterbacks who are coached to extend plays, it skews the picture. When you see a low time to throw, that still tells an accurate story. Those are your Staffords, your Kirk Cousins, the traditional pocket passers getting the ball out on schedule. But when mobile quarterbacks are consistently flirting with that 3-second mark, it's not necessarily a sign of indecision. It's a sign of play extension. There's just so much more nuance required to truly understand what that number means. Beyond the advanced metrics and statistical analysis, there was another point of discussion that I feel needs to be addressed, and it concerns the physical toll of a long season on a young quarterback's body. I have to say, Nick Wright, or Brew, as he's often called, is 100% wrong in his dismissive characterization of the shoulder issue. When he says, "Oh, his shoulder is just a little sore," it completely trivializes a complex and serious matter. The shoulder is an absolutely complicated beast. It is an unbelievably intricate piece of human anatomy. Anyone who has ever thrown a ball with any velocity, whether in baseball, in football, or any other sport, understands this on a visceral level. Shoulder soreness is not remotely the same thing as experiencing soreness in your knee or your back. The shoulder is a collection of finely tuned, interdependent muscles and joints working in concert. We're talking about your posterior deltoid, your anterior deltoid, your rear deltoid, your trapezius, your rhomboids, your teres minor, your teres major. There is an extraordinary amount of biomechanical complexity happening in that one small area of the body. It is not simply sore. It's a signal from the body that the system is under duress. I heard Drake Maye himself address this, mentioning that this was the most he had ever thrown in his life, by a significant margin. Brew tried to draw the analogy to a baseball player, and that analogy is actually perfect, but not in the way he intended. In baseball, pitchers have strict pitch counts. They're monitored meticulously because everyone understands that the throwing motion, when repeated at maximum effort, places extreme stress on the arm. Drake Maye's body was most likely starting to shut down a little bit as the season wore on and the playoff run extended. His body was quite literally starting to push back, sending signals that said, "You have never asked me to do this before. You are asking me to throw the football more times, in more high-leverage situations, over a longer period of time than I have ever been conditioned to handle." His body was essentially communicating, "I cannot handle this current load. You need to strengthen me. You need to put in the off-season work to build the endurance and resilience required to withstand this level of demand." This is a critical point. I want to see Drake Maye put in that work in the weight room and in his conditioning this off-season. And I want to be very clear about what that means. It's not about getting big and jacked for aesthetic reasons or to look the part of a prototypical quarterback. It's about functional strength. It's about building up your muscular endurance, your core stability, and the overall robustness of your throwing arm and your entire kinetic chain. It's about the unglamorous work of exercise, of building up the small stabilizing muscles that protect the joint from injury. The signal his body sent, that feeling of impending physical limitation, was a warning. You're on the verge of hurting something right now if you keep pushing at this intensity without the proper foundational strength. "I cannot withstand this current load," his body was telling him. This is precisely why baseball pitchers have innings limits and pitch counts. It's why they're managed so carefully. Old-school purists might scoff and say, "Back in my day, pitchers threw complete games and went 9 innings all the time." And the medical and scientific response to that is, that's not the way the human body works. It's not sustainable. It leads to breakdown. The old-school approach ignored the long-term consequences that we now understand all too well. Drake Maye will absolutely benefit from a dedicated off-season focusing on building that physical resilience. He needs to prepare his body to handle the rigors of a full NFL season plus a playoff run, so that when his body is asked to do something it's never done before, it responds with strength and capacity, not with warning signs and shutdown signals. So, when I look at Drake Maye's overall situation, his incredible rookie production, the clear areas for statistical improvement that are normal for his age and experience, the need for schematic evolution, and the physical maturation process that lies ahead, I see a player with a tremendously bright future. The sacks are a talking point, but they are not a terminal diagnosis. The time to throw numbers are interesting, but they require context. The shoulder soreness is a development opportunity, not a career-threatening red flag. All of these elements are part of the normal, expected growth trajectory of a young quarterback transitioning from college star to NFL franchise cornerstone. But those are just my thoughts on the matter, and I'm genuinely curious to hear what you think. This is a conversation, not a lecture. What is your assessment of Drake Maye's performance, not just in the Super Bowl, but throughout his rookie campaign and into the playoffs? Has anything you witnessed changed your view of his long-term potential? Are you more confident in his trajectory? Or do the statistical red flags we discussed give you pause? I want to know where you stand. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I genuinely value this exchange of ideas. I make it a personal commitment to read every single comment that comes through on these videos. Whether you find yourself in complete agreement with the points I've laid out or you think I've missed the mark entirely and you want to push back, I welcome the dialogue. Either way, let's use this space to get into some substantive discussions. Let's engage in some friendly, passionate debates about the game we all love. But ultimately, beyond the disagreements and the data, let's just remember to have some fun with this. Football is, at its core, entertainment. And if you find value in these deep dives in this style of conversation, I would genuinely appreciate it if you would please do consider subscribing to the channel. We are in the process of building something special here, an amazing community of football fans who want to go beyond the surface-level hot takes and really dig into the nuance of the game. I would absolutely love to see you be a part of it. My goal is to build something that we all feel a genuine connection to, a space we're all excited to be a part of and contribute to. I truly believe we are well on our way to accomplishing that. Please, also don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the content or found it thought-provoking. It genuinely does help with the visibility of the channel and, navigating the mysterious ways of the algorithm. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. It means more than you know. I'll see you in the next one.